Hello, viewer. Just reminding you that if you have a question, comment, or submission for me or any of my characters, you can send it to chronicler177 at gmail.com or post it in the fan mail channel of my Discord to have it answered in my fan mail series. And if you have the time, please leave a comment on this video to let me know what you thought of it. Your feedback is very important to me. Thanks, and enjoy the show.
The aftershock of the Third War is still felt today. While the Council of Sanghelios has become more unified in an attempt to prevent individuals like the Fleetmaster from coming to power, the human government is unraveling. Factions are appearing, lines are being drawn, and I fear the drums of battle will soon sound again. Peace is always followed by war, and war returns before scars can fully heal. The only hope for the humans to pull themselves out of conflict is the Black Armored Warrior, and he was sent after the Loyalists in the Outer Rim. No one has seen or heard from him in 15 years.
When the last war ended in 2011, I had a basic idea for where the series would go next, even if I wasn't going to work on it immediately. But the Spartan legacy was always heading this way. Sure, some of the details changed here and there, but the overall idea of a human civil war was set in stone, and that meant big things for the legacy. Until this year, there was not a true sequel to the Reach trilogy. Lifebringer took place subsequently, of course, but it was just a stepping stone. Glancing back on it, it's almost entirely all setup, establishing Zack and Guardian's new characterizations, including Teresa Denver, the Radical Reformation, and of course the Lifebringer, though only a very select few knew that she would be appearing past her titular series. Then things really started to heat up, with the Judgment Short in 2018 bringing Nyla Asaka and Marcus Garrett into the picture, and then the final Farewell Short establishing the Spartan 5 program a year later. I remember a time where Brotherhood War seemed so far away, but it's here now, my longest, biggest machinima yet, and the Spartan legacy will never be the same. I like Halo 5, I really do, but damn does this game have a lot of problems. Abysmal writing aside, I could tell early on that making machinima in Halo 5 would be a bit more of a challenge than previous games. Here's a list of some of the issues Halo 5 presented me and the ways I dealt with them. Players reverting back to recruit armor in theater mode. I was really worried about this one. Sometimes when viewing a past game in theater mode, players would be wearing default recruit armor instead of what they were wearing during the game. This posed obvious problems for machinima. Luckily, the crew of Halo Butt Buddies under the Great Isaiah had found the fix. You gotta save the theater file while all the players are still in your game lobby. So that wasn't too bad at the end. I think I ended up with only one shot in the entire thing where a Formist is wearing recruit armor. It's not really that noticeable. Fast forward, not working in theater. Yeah, these theater bugs are gonna be a trend. On a few maps, fast forward just doesn't work at all. It just speeds up the animations while running at normal speed. Looks really, really weird. I didn't find a fix for this one, but luckily I think it only happened on like 2 maps. Forge items deleting themselves in theater when you skip back or ahead. This one, I think it's tied to the fast forward bug because I only encountered it on the maps that had that issue too. It's especially noticeable on the prison exterior map in episode 2. Half the road and several background buildings are missing. Also, anyone standing above where the missing pieces were supposed to be just kind of glide a few inches above the ground, which basically ruined that fight. I had to be really careful with my camera work and editing. No known fix. First-person camera in theater mode being really laggy. This one sucked. I basically had to neuter all the first-person shots I had planned. It's not so bad if the camera stays looking forward, but if Zack turns his head, it's really noticeable. No known fix. This is a big one. Walking animations bugging the fuck out. I don't... It's horrible. I don't know. It's fucking horrible. No known fix. We just shot most walking scenes on the live machinima mode so I could cut and start over. If people started doing disco legs, I managed to keep it out of the final cut. Mostly. Forge lighting bugging out. This one's really annoying. Halo 5 has the best Forge of any Halo, but I think the lighting system still needs work. I couldn't even manage to keep it out of all of Brotherhood War. There's several shots where if you look closely, you can see shadows flashing in and out of existence. No idea what causes it, but it happens even when I haven't overtaxed the lighting budget on set. No known fix. Those are the big ones I can think of, but I knew they were coming and I did my best to prepare for them. And considering that Brotherhood War is my first big Halo 5 machinima, not to mention my largest machinima yet, I feel like I did pretty good. Brotherhood War won't just be remembered for its story, characters, cinematography, etc. It'll also be remembered as my victory over Halo 5. Let's not forget the positives. Halo 5 does have a lot of good things about it. I love the aim down sight animation, as well as Spartan charge, slide, and ground pound. Having weapon attachments like scopes and silencers is awesome, not to mention the Warzone variants of weapons and vehicles. And of course, the Forge mode is incredible. You got terrain, trees, fire, snow, rain, textures, overlays, pelicans, portals, prefabs, and so much more. Plus like 20 different canvases if you count every skybox. Nearly every single set in Brotherhood War is made from scratch in Forge, and the only major sets out of the 50 plus used that I didn't make myself were the Spartan Command Hangar, the Spartan Training Room, and the Hollow Arena. That's why the set building took like 7 months to complete. Point is, you can do a lot in Halo 5's Forge, which was the biggest thing I was looking forward to in this project. Still, with Halo Infinite on the horizon, I can only hope that these issues are fixed next time around. After all, they can't get any worse. Right? The UNSC versus Insurrectionist story is one of the oldest in Halo. The first, actually, seeing as the Fall of Reach book came out before the first game did. After Spartans and the Reach trilogy, I felt kind of played out on the whole humans versus elites thing. I wanted to take my own stab at the insurrection side of things, but originally it was just going to be as simple as that. Another Spartan story about saving humanity from a big enemy, except this time the enemy was a bit more familiar. It was Megalodon 302, writer of the Judgment short, who gave the Reformation a face and deeper motives by bringing Nyla Asaka and Marcus Garrett into the story. Suddenly, the radical reformists weren't just another big bad, they were understandable and even somewhat relatable. Then Mega went a step further and put forth the idea that Garrett was a Spartan 3, like Zack, and that, I think, was his best contribution to Brotherhood War, because we were able to upgrade the conflict from being simply human versus human to truly brother versus brother and really do the title justice. Not to mention we were able to capitalize on Zack's inner turmoil as touched upon in the last war, and give him a personal stake in the war, and add the whole story layer of Zack beginning to question the UNSC and why he follows them so blindly, despite what they did to him in the past. I truly think that without Mega's contributions to Brotherhood War, it would have been a much less interesting story. I've got to give him big thanks for his involvement. The trouble then was balancing all this. There's a lot going on in Brotherhood War, but almost all of it has to do with Zack, which made it fairly simple to tie together. I just had to make sure each issue got enough screen time. Zack and Denver's relationship, Zack and Garrett's relationship, the impact of a new Spartan program, the different points of view present in the Civil War, the darker side of the UNSC's history, and putting all of this in a perspective where it makes Zack really start to question his own loyalties for the first time. I think I managed to stack all this pretty well. Guardian got his major character development in Lifebringer. It was time for me to focus on building Zack. He's been through a lot by this point. He's around 60 years old, and he's been fighting for most of those years. He's not the disgraced, silent man he was in the last war. Catherine's sacrifice helped him stop being ashamed of his Spartan status, and his friendship with Guardian has helped him open up a bit. But he's still reserved around most everyone else, kind of unsure of himself. His developing feelings for Denver and his reconnection with Marcus made him start questioning not only himself, but his entire life working for the UNSC. So what does he do? He clamps down even harder on his service, putting absolute, almost blind trust in the UNSC. When Silva brings up questions about the war, he tells her to ignore it and trust the UNSC. He lets himself grow closer to Manias, a perceived authority figure, than he does with his love interest or his friend. He was about ready to kill Garrett in the end, too. And what does all this get him? A knife. The biggest knife, right in the back. The events of Brotherhood War have rocked Zack's world, perhaps irreparably. Riley and I worked together to make sure we nailed Zack's characterization. I held my first live voice acting sessions in like 6 years to do so. Riley really gets Zack, maybe even better than I do, and he had some good input on Zack's lines. It's awesome to be able to work with him. Emma Gordon was unfortunately unavailable to return as Teresa Denver. Luckily, while working with Darkfeather during Omega Halo, I realized that she'd be a great successor to play Denver, and I was right. In fact, Feather was even better, I think, having lots more experience voice acting. I noticed she especially excelled during Denver's quieter moments. She built upon the character that Emma established, a tough, take-no-shit woman who this time around had her own set of conflicts. her feelings of inadequacy when she finds out she can't be a Spartan, as well as watching her Marines get shunted aside as the Spartan Fives rise to prominence, not to mention the loss of all of her family while she was gone. Despite all this, Denver continues to prove that you don't have to be a Spartan to be a hero. But in a world dominated by the Spartans, even she'll struggle to keep up. The Radical Reformation got largely expanded and a little retconned for Brotherhood War. Lifebringer set them up as technology worshippers, but that was before I knew Judgment was going to come along and flesh them out. So I now see that scene as Zack guessing what the Reformation was about and guessing wrongly. After all, the Reformist leader didn't say he was right with his guess, just that the Forerunner tech would make them rulers, which it probably would have if Zack hadn't stopped them. Plus, that guy was probably a little overzealous. Anyway, my main struggle with the Reformists was to give them sympathy, but not enough sympathy that you can justify them. They're downtrodden, desperate people whose government has mistreated, taken advantage of, and abandoned. But they're also willing to bomb entire cities and ally with maniacal alien tyrants. Kinda how like the UNSC aims to safeguard and expand humanity, but they also kidnap children, treat their colonists like shit, and manipulate entire wars. Point is, everyone's kinda gray this time around. I humanized the Reformists by giving them little moments where they just talk to each other, and I gave them custom-made combat dialogue so it's like they're communicating in battle, and also death sounds. But I had to be careful for making it look like the UNSC is just slaughtering a bunch of angry farmers. It's a fine line to tread, and I think having characters like Asaka and Garrett helped ground their viewpoints and give us the other side of things, without making the Civil War into an underdog story. I really wanted the viewer to feel as torn as Zack does on the matter, and maybe debate a bit about which side they were rooting for. Hugh Verheloegen, aka Mega Productions 302, took a lot of initiative developing Garrett's character past his original inception, expanding his tragic backstory and taking all of that pain and betrayal he feels and putting into his voice. He had his lines finished and turned in within a few weeks of the script's completion. I think he set a new record. Ashley Aishwarya returned with enthusiasm to play Nyla Asaka. She does a fantastic job of making Nyla toe the line between monstrous and empathetic. She shows defiant rage against her enemies, real concern for her own people, and regret when she realizes the mistake she's made. One of the best performances in the production, in my opinion. The Spartan Fives went through several design iterations as I fleshed them out. I was originally going to go with the black and orange color scheme from Halo 4, but decided that'd be too close to Zack's armor, and I really wanted him to stand out among the Fives. I went through various shades of green before finally choosing the brown and red with the blue visor that's in the final design. I also came up with 20 different armor combinations for each Spartans to wear based on their roles in combat. It's not just random armor thrown together, each suit means something. I wish I could write a visual dictionary for the Fives. There's so much lore I put into them and it didn't make it into Brotherhood War. From their outfitting to fire teams to deployment. Maybe someday. In a series called The Spartan Legacy, a new generation of Spartans is a big deal, especially when they're the first to be mass-produced. Obviously, the Spartan 5 program was kickstarted by the Lifebringer for her plan, but humanity would have gotten around to it themselves eventually, one way or another. It's inevitable. The Spartan Fives are front and center in Brotherhood War, represented by Fireteam Corsair. Leading them is returning fan-favorite character Sergeant Scott. But he's more than just a sergeant now. Remember that little line in Omega Halo?
Guess the brass figured I was good enough to lead this sorry bunch after Cairo. Who knows? Maybe the next stop is Spartan.
Yeah, I've had this planned. Scott's pretty much the same despite now having a stronger body and better equipment. A skilled, efficient, fearless leader. He's joined by 3 newcomers. Hadley was designed to be the conflict of the group. He's a good guy and a good soldier who likes to joke around with his teammates, but he's very opinionated about the Reformation due to his bias from his inter-colony upbringing. So much so that he sometimes takes matters into his own hands, whether or not Scott approves of it. He's cocky and overconfident in the Spartan program, and these traits didn't serve him well. Laughing Block captures this dual-sided personality very well. You may know him from Omega Halo, Wasteland 2019, and other directors' machinimas. He's able to make Hadley go from jovial to chilling in an instant, and it's awesome. Chen is Corsair's walking tank, voiced by Nyoka. I've never seen someone so happy to play a character before. Nyoka loves Chen's bombastic, aggressive personality, and her enthusiasm to voice act Chen bleeds into Chen's enthusiasm to blow stuff up and smash things. It's a magical blend and works really well for the group. And then there's Silva. Silva may not look like much yet, but her story is just beginning. She uses a simple loadout and uses the base armor permutation, but underneath her unassuming exterior is a powerful Spartan who nearly bested Zack at his own game. Silva was also one of the few to begin openly questioning the war in the UNSC. She has a strong sense of individuality, likely brought on from her outer colony upbringing, same as the Reformists. Catastrophe VA has begun tackling Silva's role with great success, capturing her quiet but thoughtful manner very well. We'll be watching her career with great interest. The Spartan 5 program is a symptom of not only humanity's technological advancement since the end of Halo 3, but also the UNSC's continuing need to hold Earth and her colonies in an iron fist. I wanted to establish them both as a threatening and reassuring presence in the universe. The Marines are glad to have them on the battlefield, but they also realize that the Spartans are making them obsolete as soldiers. The Reformation views them as more products of the vicious UNSC war machine and fears them, demonizing them into brainwashed robot people. And the Lifebringer who made them sees them as simply tools, robbing them of their free will in order to achieve her own ends. And now the Spartans will be seen as the executioners of the UNSC, traitors to humanity and oppressors of the people. Although they had no choice in the matter, the Lifebringer's plan will mean terrible things for the name of Spartan. Ah, the twist. Perhaps not the most original twist ever, but an effective one, and I would bet you didn't see it coming. Who could have seen the outright death of the UNSC coming, especially from an enemy thought dead herself? The Lifebringer accomplished what her predecessors, Shipmaster Kotomi and Fleetmaster Crudom, failed to do. She won. And she did it not with overwhelming force or devastating superweapons. She did it through patience. Go back and watch Brotherhood War again, but this time, picture everything Manias says from the Lifebringer's perspective. It changes up the context of a lot of scenes. For example, the moment in the courtroom where Manias shuts Asaka up goes from a guy reestablishing order in the court to the Lifebringer telling Asaka, "It's not time yet, don't blow it." And this little conversation with Zack and Denver...
The Lifebringer? Yes. We want to keep anything regarding her or the Hyborians under wraps for now. Top-level clearance only. I don't want everyone panicking over another possible danger to humanity. The Reformists are bad enough without a former god returning from the dead. You are positive you eliminated her, aren't you?
Guardian made sure that the portal would lock her in, and I kicked her in myself. We won't be seeing her anytime soon.
Indeed. Well, that's very good.
It's just a Lifebringer patting herself on the back. That's the kind of self-confidence that comes from, "I'm about to destroy your whole way of life and you have no idea." But really, her plan was masterful coming from someone who wasn't a military general or a religious fanatic or something like that. Maybe that's why it worked. This is the first time I've had a villain return in the Spartan legacy, and I wanted to make sure she adapted because of her defeat. The Lifebringer knew from her previous defeat at Zack's hands that the regular tactical approach wasn't going to cut it, so she invented and became Arthur Manias. Manias was the perfect charade. Intelligent, charismatic, strong-willed. Tatsumari played him eloquently. I didn't really know what Manias was going to sound like until Tatsu came up with that Sean Connery-style voice. I think it worked really well. It's unique and memorable and different than all the other UNSC characters, subtly planting the idea in the viewer that Manias is separate from the rest, without setting off any real alarm bells. What's really cool is that not necessarily everything the Lifebringer says as Manias is a lie. Some of Manias' heart-to-heart moments with Zack offer a lot of insight into what the Lifebringer subscribes to. Like when they talk about the Reformation, she talks about her dislike of disloyalty and instability, secretly foreshadowing how, even though the Reformers helped her so much, she's going to betray them in the end. Through Manias, she exploits Zack's reliance on a governing authority figure and keeps him on the side of the UNSC, doing whatever she wants him to do, despite the emotional pull from Garrett and the Reformation. She uses him like a pawn in chess, making sure he's busy with the war and his internal conflict about Garrett to keep him from questioning Manias, giving him a source of emotional comfort and becoming a trustworthy confidant to get close to him. The Lifebringer managed to work him right into the spot she wanted him in, so it came time for the knife to fall. Zack never saw it coming. She had him right there in that office, and he probably would have died had Guardian not intervened. Alyssa waited years for her return to the playing field. She was eager to bring the Lifebringer back in all her evil glory, and she was especially excited to see her character win. Alyssa brings back the confidence and haughtiness that we saw before and mixes in a bit more wisdom and a bit more rage as a result of her defeat at Zack's hands previously. I couldn't imagine anyone else playing the Lifebringer as well, even if I'm a bit scared at how much she enjoys playing a villain. I dabbled in a few things on the technical level to make Brotherhood War a more cinematic experience than previous projects. I think the most noticeable thing is the letterbox formatting. It's not real letterboxing, as in the videos weren't shot in a certain aspect ratio that required the black matte bars. Rather, the bars were superimposed on top of the original footage without being too obtrusive. It's a subtle thing, but it makes a big difference. Kind of makes you unconsciously feel like you're watching Brotherhood War in a real theater. I also experimented with Dutch angles and color grading in one or two scenes, but not much. There weren't many scenes I felt I needed to do this with. The audio work got a much bigger overhaul than the video work, though. I wanted to make some big changes from how I did audio leveling in the past, as I've realized I could sometimes make scenes much too loud, which resulted in the sound clipping and not sounding very good. There were also times that music was too loud to hear dialogue properly, or sometimes the dialogue might be too quiet. I didn't want Brotherhood War to suffer from any of these problems, and I took painstaking measures and combed every single episode over and over again to ensure that audio stayed at a more relatively equal levels throughout the whole thing. I'm not going to say I was 100% successful, but I do feel like it's much better than older projects, even Omega Halo. I also started using a technique I call directional voice audio. This is where characters that are farther away from the camera usually sound quieter than those who are closer to the camera.
Senator Isaka, you and your Reformation claim to seek a new future for humanity. Does this new future involve the overthrowing and destruction of both the UEG and UNSC?
It is true. We desire the removal of these governmental establishments.
It's a simple thing, but I feel like it both adds to the realism as well as helps the viewer keep track of who is talking. You might not even notice it if you weren't paying attention, it's so natural and it flows really well, but if you did notice it, it's like, wow, that makes a big difference. In addition to DVA, I also experimented with adding voice effects based on the environment, mostly reverb. The best example of this is the Zack and Garrett scene at the end of Part 4. They're in a huge room, so their voices bounce off the walls and reverb a lot, especially when they are speaking louder as they're further away.
I knew you'd make it this far. Sorry for separating you from your friends, but I didn't want them interfering with us.
There's nowhere to run this time. You're finished.
But as Zack gets closer to Garrett and they talk more softly, the reverb gets toned down a little bit, but it's still there.
I would have thought that, after all we went through together back in the day, you would care about me too. I still think of you as family. My last family.
It's another thing that I think really adds to the realism of some scenes. It does make a big difference. I'm glad that I experimented with it. Shaoryu Dragoon returned as chief animator for Brotherhood War, and unlike the epic crunch that was Omega Halo, he had plenty of time to flex his animating skills and come up with some awesome scenes. Since Omega Halo Space Battle was cut, I wrote a few for Brotherhood War to compensate. Like before, I made rough storyboards for each scene, and then my dad redid them in greater clarity and detail. Dragoon got to finally flesh out what had been planned for Omega Halo, and he even added some of his own content, like repurposing test scenes for Omega Halo, or coming up with entire shots on his own. He also made preliminary storyboards for a scene of a frigate crashing into an Earth city, but we just didn't have the time or the tech to make it. Dragoon made advances in adding in SFM elements to in-engine shots, primarily Episode 2 with the Reformist cruiser above Seattle. We were also able to implement Guardian's hologram this way without using Forge. First, I shot scenes with an empty spot without Guardian, and then made a rough cut with the placeholder images where Guardian would be. Using the rough cut, Dragoon was able to fully animate Guardian's hologram, and the effect is so good you wouldn't even know he isn't there in engine. Sean Jacoby also came aboard production, offering his talents in designing title sequences. He came up with the opening titles and created the background for the credits. It looks superb, and I can't wait to work with him again on future products. Oh, by the way, did you catch the symbol for the Forerunner mantle in the opening? There it is. I was hinting at the Lifebringer from the very beginning. Even as my longest, biggest machinima yet, Brotherhood War had some things cut from it. The most notable being Fireteam Hammer. Originally, Part 4 was supposed to feature Fireteam Corsair escorting another Spartan fireteam, Fireteam Hammer, to the Reformist base. Hammer would have driven the vehicles and Corsair would have rode around on the tank treads. Unfortunately, this meant that not only would I need 5 actors for Zack and Corsair, but also 5 more actors for Hammer. There would have been 3 Mantises originally. That left only 6 actors for Reformists, and that was if I could get a full lobby of 16 players. Which, unfortunately, when the day came to start filming Part 4, I could not. So I quickly rewrote Hammer out of Part 4, giving most of their lines to Scott, and acting went much smoother from there. If the assault on the Reformist base seems a bit understaffed, or it seems weird that the vehicles were already there for Corsair, that's why. Also left out of Part 4 was a sequence where Zack, Scott, and Silva made their way through the ruined structure and fought some Reformists before sneaking into the compound. That was cut for runtime and pacing issues. Part 2 was supposed to have a chase scene where Zack and Denver pursue Asaka and Warthogs before confronting her. That was scripted, but cut before finalization because I realized Part 2 would be too long if we included that. I moved the chase scene to Part 5 as the escape sequence where the main trio would be pursued by Spartans and Warthogs, but it was cut again due to set building issues and squished into the version that you see in release. Maybe one of these days I'll actually get to include a Warthog chase in something. Brotherhood War ends on a very dark note. The UNSC is devastated. The Lifebringer is in control. Civilians are being held hostage. Our heroes are on the run. This is the darkest time in the Spartan legacy so far. Brotherhood War was always going to end with the Lifebringer taking over. And this leaves several things unresolved, such as Zack and Garrett's troubled relationship, Zack and Denver's feelings for each other, the Lifebringer's plan, Asaka's imprisonment, Zack's loyalties, things like that. A lot of those things will be addressed in Aftermath, though I don't plan to wrap everything up with a snap of my fingers. The entire point of Brotherhood War's ending is its lasting effects on the world and its characters. I could see some people taking issue with Brotherhood War's ending, feeling that the Lifebringer's revenge overshadowed the Civil War and renders it meaningless. But actually, the Civil War is the entire reason the Lifebringer's back in the first place. If the UNSC hadn't pissed off the Reformation so much, they'd never have freed the Lifebringer. It's a consequence that will leave a massive wound in the Spartan legacy, one that may never fully heal. As the Lifebringer said, the UNSC is dead. The Reformation accomplished what they set out to do. We are now in a post-UNSC universe, all because of the Civil War. So the question is, where will the Spartan legacy go from here? You'll see. And hopefully you won't have to wait too long. I'm going to try to have Aftermath done by the end of the year. I can't say much about what lies ahead right now, but I will say this. Brotherhood War is the tipping point for what will eventually become the end of the Spartan legacy. We've already started down this road. There's no going back from here.